We begin in around 1900 BC.
Starting with the book of Genesis, we meet Abram, a name that means exalted father. We see how God calls Abram and learn how Abram, who is the model of faith, responds to God's call.
Abram came from Ur, an ancient city north of the Persian Gulf, and moved to Haran, where the Turkish-Syrian border is today.
When Abram was in Haran, God called Abram and said these words. God made a covenant with Abram and changed Abram's name to Abraham, which means father of multitudes. Abram was promised to receive
blessings, land, and countless descendants.
The promised land was at Canaan and is also known as Israel, Holy Land, Judah, or Judea.
In his old age, Abraham accepted his pilgrim status by moving to a land he had never seen. In faith, Abraham accepted that he would have to trust in the Lord and be dependent on God. Some years later, when Abraham was 99 years old, God appeared to Abraham and promises a son. As promised by God, a son was born to Abraham and Sarah, called Isaac. Then one day God tested Abraham and asked that he sacrifice his son Isaac, who he loved so much. It was by faith that Abraham trusted in God and accepted to sacrifice his son, as painful as that might have been. But just as Abraham picked up the knife, the angel of the Lord stopped Abraham, as Abraham had shown how much he honored and would obey God. Isaac went on to have two sons of his own, Esau and Jacob. Jacob had 12 sons. Jacob's 12 sons formed the 12 tribes of Israel. The book of Genesis ends with stories of Jacob's family. Jacob loved his son Joseph the most, and Joseph had a gift. Joseph's brothers were jealous, and unable to bear their jealousy, they sold Joseph to one of Pharaoh's officers in Egypt. As the Lord was with Joseph, Joseph was very successful in Egypt. Joseph correctly interpreted Pharaoh's dreams and predicted a famine in Egypt. As a result, the Egyptians stored up so much grain that they were spared starvation when the famine struck. Because of Joseph, Pharaoh was even able to sell grain to neighboring lands, including to Joseph's brothers who came from Canaan to Egypt to buy grain. Joseph forgave his brothers, and his family was reunited, and they all moved to Egypt.
We now enter the book of Exodus.
Jacob's sons and their descendants multiplied greatly in Egypt. Then a new Pharaoh who knew nothing about Joseph came into power in Egypt. The new Pharaoh felt threatened by the number of Hebrews living in Egypt. and he made the Hebrews become slaves to the Egyptians. The Hebrews were oppressed with hard labor for about 430 years. Pharaoh also issued an order to kill all newborn Hebrew baby boys. At that time, Moses was born, and his mother placed baby Moses in a basket made of reeds and placed the basket at the edge of a river. When Pharaoh's daughter went to the river, she noticed the baby in the basket, and feeling sorry for him, she took him in and adopted Moses as her own son. When Moses grew up, he visited his Hebrew people in Egypt and saw how they were oppressed and made to do hard labor. One day, when Moses was out shepherding the sheep by a mountain, he saw a burning bush. Moses is sent on a mission by God when an angel of the Lord appears to Moses, and God speaks to Moses in the burning bush and asks that Moses lead the oppressed Hebrews out of slavery in Egypt. The book of Exodus shows us how Moses followed God's command and led the Israelites out of Egypt and freedom from slavery. This was after God sent 10 plagues on Egypt, as God allowed the Hebrews to pass safely through the Red Sea. The pivotal moment of the Old Testament happens when the Israelites reach Mount Sinai, and God gave the Israelites the 10 Commandments as a guide for living. Abraham acted in faith, and he did not believe in fate. But what's the difference?
Faith.
Fate.
Faith.
It's all predetermined.